There's a guy named Aubrey Daniels. He's a behavior analyst, and he writes about traditional accountability, mostly in business. And he says this is the way management typically flows. It's very top-down. And so the executive really almost never talks to the frontline implementers. It flows this way, from executive to manager to supervisor to frontline. And Aubrey says that's all wrong. By the way, he's the guy who coined the term organizational behavior management. You ever heard that term? That's Aubrey Daniels. He's written lots of books. He has a company in Georgia, in Atlanta, Georgia, and he trained with B.F. Skinner. So he really is but he works outside of education, so you wouldn't necessarily know him. He wrote the best chapter, titled something like How I Would Run a School, if I could. And if you want it, I will send it to you. The Wing Institute published it. I scanned it, and so I have a scanned copy. So if you want a copy of it, email me. I will send it to you. It's a quick read. It's very, very well done. But he says the way it should work is called reverse behavioral engineering. And that is, everything should begin with the frontline definition. What is it that we want to see happening between the teacher and the child every single day? And by the way, that's where all the variance is. Like, I'm a researcher. We're always looking for what can we put into our models that will eat up some variance in student outcomes. Nothing competes with teacher quality, the quality of the teacher-student interaction. That's so important for teachers to hear. Free and reduced lunch, then compete once you control for quality. All kinds of things we worry about. Doesn't even compete once you control for the quality of the instructional interaction and you ensure it's a high quality. Nothing beats that. So if you start with that at your front line, then you can ask, what is it, everything else that occurs outside of the teacher-student interaction, that relationship, those instructional interactions that unfold every day, every single layer in the school should be designed to support what is happening on that front line. That's an interesting filter to apply, to think about the structures that you have in your system and to ask, are they really supporting the quality of the instructional interaction that's unfolding between the teacher and the student? That is a new way of thinking. That's a new way to think about it, because we've got all kinds of things and practices that we do by convention, that we do by habit, that do not meet that standard. And it's just an interesting way to rethink the extent to which you are supporting what's most important. So in education, we're also very guilty about, we have sort of our espoused values, but then these are not well aligned with our reward systems. And I'll give you a classic example, is paying teachers based upon years of experience and degree, your highest degree earned. Those are variables that are not systematically related to higher quality teacher-student interaction and better student outcomes, and yet that's how we built our pay structure. It doesn't make any sense. Our reward system is out of sync with our espoused value, which is we want to support the highest quality instruction for every child, and every child should grow. So that's something we can look at. Okay, and that's a quote from Aubrey, which I will let you read at your leisure. So what happens is, once you start to engage in building trust and demonstrating technical mastery, but thinking about adaptive leadership and credibility and managing the discomfort of a change process and tending to your slow adopters so they can be successful, especially in the world of RTI, what happens is there's a culture shift. Once you have enough implementation, suddenly you see this shift where people are not fighting over limited, scarce resources, but instead are recognizing, if I'm the 6th grade math teacher, I care about what's happening in 3rd grade math. I don't want 3rd grade math to be so crappy that I can continue to point to 3rd grade math and say, hey, I'm so great, look how great I am, because 3rd grade math is so crappy. Because what happens is, if 3rd grade math is stronger, then I do a better job. I get better results, because we're all responsible for all learners in the system. And you do absolutely have to manage your message. You ever worked in a toxic environment? You have any toxic environments in your state? They exist. I mean, it's real. The problem is, if you don't address it head on, it can take on a life of its own. And you know, a lot of times leaders in education really weren't trained to be great leaders. We weren't. Often we were former teachers or some other professional working in the schools. Then we sort of apprenticed and became maybe a principal and climbed from there. We weren't really trained to be great leaders, and yet we talk about the most socially meaningful work on the planet, in my mind, is running educational systems. We should be functioning like the very best CEOs in terms of leadership, and we don't always have that opportunity. So this is something a lot of places do not do well. They don't know how to do it. So they sometimes they're just sort of scattershot. It's like sometimes I'll use my personal relationship with you to try to get you to be less toxic. Sometimes I'll avoid you because you make me crazy. You know, I think you have to take a very direct and intentional approach to managing the message. You know where your toxicity is if you're a leader, and you go directly to it, you seek it out, you say, here is your opportunity, this is the way you can give me this critical feedback that I know you want to share. I will receive it, I will hear it, this is the outlet for it, and it doesn't leave this room. It is not appropriate for this negative feedback or critical feedback to be discussed in front of parents in parent-teacher conferences. It's not appropriate to be discussed in large faculty meetings unless we have structured the time for it and invited it. I mean, I personally think you have to contain it that way, or it can really truly take on a life of its own and ruin what is a really good effort. So Bushel and Bear say the first thing you have to do is find out where you are. That's easier than it has ever been with high-stakes testing that happens at the end of every year, as well as way too much universal screening. I mean, you definitely know where you are. If you don't know where you are lost. But the great news about that is everyone should grow. And Maynard Reynolds said that in 1975, that assessment today should be about making a difference in the lives of children rather than making a prediction about their lives. He said that in 1975. We can forecast so well, but what we really need to be about is violating that forecast.